Hi, I am Kevin, or Script Scribbles, a slightly successful blogger from Tumblr and Twitter and Instagram if you want to see me being shallow. Welcome to my Doctor Who Series 11 YouTube coverage. So without further ado, The Woman Who Fell to Earth, written by Chris Chibnall. The mission statement for this year really seems to be inclusivity and diversity. Not only do we have, on the production side of things, the very, very first people of color to write any Doctor Who ever, and not only are they writers, it's a more writer's room format, which means their input more or less contributes to the whole series, depending on how this hybrid writer's room versus British television formula breaks down, which will be interesting to learn about as time goes on. But not only is that behind the scenes, and not only do we have the amazing revelation of the first female Doctor, something that's been in the cards for a long, long time. And any old fans, if you want to fight me on this, I will fight you, and I will win, because not only do I have, but I've been following this series a long time, and I've done my research, and the way for a female Doctor has been there for ages. I mean, you had Tom Baker saying, oh, I could regenerate into a woman as a joke. You had stuff like Stephen Moffat's The Curse of Fatal Death, setting up the possibility and joking about it, and let me just get this stated for the record. Stephen Moffat was pro-female Doctor and paved the way for it unambiguously. If you don't think a female Doctor is a good idea, look at, say, Sidney Newman. He helped create Doctor Who. Sidney Newman, in the 80s, when the show was kind of dying horribly, let's be real, Colin Baker's era did not work for some reasons, I would say. Abusive dynamics with Barry. His big proposal was have Patrick Troughton come back for a while for some reason and then regenerate into a woman. So the fact is, a woman Doctor has been on the cards for ages, and we are finally there. But that is not all there is to this year's diversity mission statement, because not only do we have Jodie Whittaker, but we have 3 companions, all designed by Chris Chibnall, to be different points of accessibility for a wide variety of audiences. And that's what The Woman Who Fell to Earth is really, really about. It's about setting up a diverse and welcoming world in which Jodie's Doctor can fall into. From the beginning, we have Ryan talking about a very important woman in his life, and of course, we expect it's the Doctor. And it's not. That's the thing about this episode. It's about the people in it, not just the Doctor who impacts it. He's talking about his Nan, Grace. And there we have the really clever twist of this episode. It's about a family of Ryan, Grace, and Graham, and to a lesser extent, Yaz, another new companion who is the only one not connected to this family dynamic directly. And so, what this story is about that thematic juxtaposition. So let's break into how this script constructs itself and sets up its thematic layers around Grace as the woman who fell to Earth, which is, of course, her death. So we meet Ryan, and we cut to him with his Nan. First shot of the episode after the YouTube, him and his Nan. It's not subtle, but it's also not what you expect, because you assume it's the Doctor. She was falling when we last saw her. So from there we go to Ryan, and again the diversity mission statement comes up. He's a young black man working very hard to become an engineering student, and he's got a condition called dyspraxia. So we have a young black man with slight disability, which is phenomenal and different. We've never had a character like that in Doctor Who. And that is why these stories are worth telling, because this is something new that people in the real world are and have never seen themselves in this show. Of course you need to do that. And from there we meet Graham, his step-granddad, who is a cancer survivor, and still in remission, which is fantastic. You do not see stories about this. We've not really had any older companions, period. Certainly not his age. Not aside from, unless you want to look at Big Finish, which, one of their better moments, they did. Here's the best one I've got to show. Oh, wait, no, it doesn't have her on it, but Evelyn Smythe, a older historian who was an absolutely fantastic companion and match for the Sixth Doctor, who, unlike Perry, didn't get abused, because Big Finish actually could write. And we meet Yaz as the alien activity begins, and he calls the police, meeting an old friend from school, who is South Asian, yet more diversity. Yay! The plot, when it comes, is fairly straightforward, and that can be seen as a good thing and a bad thing. On the good side, it works very efficiently as a device to get the characters rolling. By 4 minutes in, we've established all 3 new companions, Grace, and we've established some sort of alien threat. Then over the next 5 or so minutes, we get ratcheting up tension of these characters facing a threat. And this not a Doctor Who story yet is the really interesting approach. We do not see the titles roll. We do not hear the theme. Everything about this is a new show. And it's a show about this family and Yaz confronting aliens. And so we get to the train sequence, and it's a tense and exciting bit. And finally, from the sky, the Doctor crashes in and everything changes. It's like that teaser trailer we got, the really weird one with the pizza, and it's about how the Doctor crashes into ordinary people's lives and how that impacts them and how they get whisked away. That's really the recipe for the show from the beginning, when you had 2 school teachers investigate a box in the junkyard and find the great spirit of adventure that also got them nearly killed on a regular basis. I love that era so much.
Susan, why don't you give me those scissors? Give them to me.
So this really is the part of the episode that Chris Chibnall excels at. He's really, really good at sketching out a community of very different, very interesting people. If anyone's not seen Broadchurch, I highly recommend it. The entire episode is basically what we get in these first 10 minutes, the entire first episode of Broadchurch. It's sketching out the lives of an entire community and their reaction to one event in their area. And so, here, credit where it's due, the ingredients for Doctor Who come very, very quickly, but not ever at the expense of this world being sketched out. In fact, they respond to it. We don't get the Doctor till 10 minutes in, we don't get the first glimpse of the sonic screwdriver till 30 minutes in, costume doesn't come till the end. It is very meticulously paced, just as with the hold off of the theme, which we finally get a hint of when the Doctor makes her appearance. Brilliant move, I love that. Because her appearance is when we know Doctor Who has officially begun again, as opposed to this show that's going to become her world when she crashes to Earth. So from that, we get some very interesting thematic layers as the alien threat is developed. We have an alien threat developed based on recurrences of trauma and grief, sort of. What we have is a creature that has stolen people's families. We get Rahul, who is a character who doesn't get the best showing in this episode. I would say his emotional stakes are very shafted, and we don't actually find out what his deal is till more or less...
Where's my sister?
He dies. Which was not, for me, the best creative choice. But what it does offer is a very pointed exchange about halfway through the episode regarding his sister.
You knew what he was doing might kill him?
She was his family.
And what we can see in that exchange is the exact same dynamic we get later with Grace and her inability to let the same thing happen to Ryan.
Descend, I'll climb up.
I don't want you doing that.
Graham, Ryan's in danger. We don't have time to argue.
Grace knows full well she could die, but she doesn't care because Ryan is in danger, so there's no time to argue. And there we get the episode, really. Its heart is in saving families, and in the lengths people go to do that.
Don't let anyone else go through this.
Unfortunately, this is not also the deepest part of the episode, because though the thematic layers are present, they don't feel very lived in. The dialogue itself of that exchange, like I mentioned with Rahul, that foreshadows Grace, is it does foreshadow it, but it also doesn't feel very detailed or lived in or organic in a way where I feel like Stephen Moffat in particular was very much about those structural shell games and emotional moments feeding into each other and reflecting each other, even without on the surface being the same thing. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure anyone really felt much when Grace died. And it's not really the most effective emotional beat. I mean, it didn't even come off as much of a shock for me. Chibnall, as everyone knows and has joked about at length, was really, really anal on the promotion. We do not know much about most of the episodes. We still only have 2 other titles, The Witchfinders and The Ghost Monument. And one of the few things you do always know is who the Doctor and the companions are. We knew that the companions would be Graham, Ryan, and Yaz. And unfortunately, Grace isn't one of those. So the more and more she's sketched out as a character who could be a companion, who's warm and friendly and loving the adventure too much for her own good, the moment you see her start to push the limits of what could be safe, you know she's going to die. And we've seen Doctor Who do this trick before, in Before the Flood, which I have not great feelings on, but in that episode we saw the same thing with O'Donnell, who didn't really follow the warnings by the Doctor and launched herself into the adventure and was shown to be the perfect companion and got killed for it. So it really didn't feel like a shock, and I feel like building up all this foreshadowing and turning the gears of the plot to make Grace's death into the twist about who the titular woman who fell to Earth is, that's all really clever and I really admire it, but I don't feel it. I don't feel much about that, and this isn't me trying to bash Chibnall for being a bad writer. God knows there's a lot of that out there right now, but he's not. He is a really, really good writer. I don't care what anyone says. Again, for example, Broadchurch. The opening episode is a long reaction by an entire village to the death of one child, and you feel every single permutation of that deeply. And he is so good at that. And that just makes me wish this episode didn't deal so much with Tim Shaw. What we have with the plot of Tim Shaw is at best described as functional. He works as a joke. I mean, the name is hilarious. And Jodie Whittaker performs the reaction to his name in the funniest frigging way. She's like,
Tim Shaw.
She is so funny and so warm as the Doctor. She nails that. But he doesn't feel threatening. I mean, the whole teeth thing, that's gonna freak some people out, and I really hope some kids were seriously grossed out by that. But I just thought it looked kind of gross, and not in like a, ooh, I can't watch way, but more of a, that looks like a really weird design that doesn't do much for me way. And I don't really get why his build-up is handled the way it is. What we get there is he does a lot of killing, and I'm not sure about how that's paced. For example, we get Rahul getting killed off, which is a very built-up scene. We see a lot of Rahul. But then right after that, we go to the salad guy, who's just kind of like, I'm gonna chuck my salad at you. Go away, mister. And it's like, okay. I don't really get why we need to have 2 quick successions of developing random characters who are not going to come back in any capacity just to kill them. And one would do. We get it. He's a bad dude. He just killed someone. I don't get why the second death was necessary there. Though that is also the best thing about the red shirts in this episode. The way every single one of them does have a life to them. Like I said, Rahul didn't really connect much to me emotionally, but I'm glad he had that arc about his sister and that developed things. And better yet than that, the old man at the construction site who is calling his granddaughter, that was fantastic and sad and just right, and that is what I like Chris Chibnall for. I mean, I'm not going to be one of those people who says, Stephen Moffat didn't care about character. He did. That's why everyone hates Hellbent, because it was all about character.
People like me and you, we should say things to one another. And I'm going to say them now.
That's why it was a good episode, too. Anyway, The point is, Chris Chibnall is really good at developing an immense number of characters, all of whom have ordinary lives, and then tearing those worlds apart. And that's the best part of this episode. Not the thing that tears these worlds apart, but the part that gets torn apart. While it doesn't entirely make sense, for example, that an alien race of predator ripoffs decides to only hunt on Earth, which is said to be 5,000 galaxies away. Like, that's gotta be a long trip. That recurrence doesn't matter so much as the people whose lives get disturbed by it. And while I don't feel much about Grace's death, for example, I do love the hyper-focus on how the Doctor's impact in the world changes people, and changes their lives, and changes their emotional well-being. Being around the Doctor can hurt, and I like that a lot.
And I'm with him. We don't get aliens in Sheffield.
Think he's still in shock, bless him.
There we come one part that I didn't like in terms of the plot. Carl, the hapless victim of Tim. The thing about Carl is he feels like a mean-spirited joke.
Somebody out there wants me.
Somebody out there wants me.
His character is defined by anxieties and fears and insecurities, which are very much mental health conditions that feel like they should be welcomed by this diverse mission statement. And yet, he's the butt of the joke. His listening to the self-help tape, for example, is a joke on him because while he's saying there's someone out there who wants me, we get Tim climbing up the tower to kill him. And it just sort of progresses like that. There is a nice moment where he says, I am special, trying to jump off the tower, jump off one crane to the other to get to the Doctor. And she says back to him,
Yes, you are!
That is what I like the Doctor for. But when Carl pushes Tim to his, well, not death.
I am important! You had no right to do that.
Why didn't he have a right to do that? He was a victim, he had no choice in this, very little agency, and he nearly died. He would have been terrified. I mean, he's already terrified. He mentions he's terrified of heights and is only working this job because his dad runs the company. Can you imagine that? Being terrified of heights and working in a crane. That's just not fun. And so yeah, he pushes an alien that specifically wanted to hunt him and kill him. I don't like the moral condemnation of that. That doesn't sit right with me. I know the Doctor can be really, really judgy on morals. I mean, make the foundation of the society a man that never would, he says, having done so a number of times. But it doesn't feel right to be using a character with anxiety and mental health conditions as that target. It feels out of keeping with this mission statement, as does, for that matter, killing Grace in the first place, which, while perfect for the theme of disrupting people's lives, you're killing a woman of color there. There aren't that many on TV, and it is absolutely affridging, because her death is done to impact the two men on the show. Yaz has no connection to it. The Doctor has no connection to it. And that is problematic. I'm not going to say it's bad, but it's problematic. And yeah, frankly, the Carl plot made me uncomfortable. But while the micro aspects of the plot, in terms, they were cleanly plotted but didn't always satisfy me, the way the show itself has come back is wonderful. This is what I love Doctor Who for. The way we get the sonic screwdriver introduced is perfect. I love her going DIY with it. It's fun to see her melt down spoons and grab crystals out of the baddie's tech and just be like, boop, that goes in there. This sonic screwdriver is so fine, they made 2 toys. God knows why, but this one bends. I don't know how you can melt spoons and make them bend, but it's a great sonic screwdriver, and I loved seeing her have to build it and prove her ingenuity. And then the reveals are paced. As I mentioned previously, sonic screwdriver comes at the exact midpoint of the episode, 30 minutes in, And we get the costume revealed right at the end, which is always the best place to put it. Now, I'm not entirely sold on the costume reveal as it's placed into the episode. It feels a bit tonally jarring following immediately after.
I should have gone, and Grace should still be here.
I really, really liked those scenes and how Ryan's history with his dad was developed, as well as Graham's history with cancer. Those were great, and they set up some interesting directions in future. Maybe we'll meet Ryan's dad in future, and maybe in future we'll see Graham trying to act on his wish to die in Grace's place. Those offer drama, and I'm so here for that. But from there we go straight into a happy, funny scene of the doctor trying on clothes, and it's funny. She's such a funny woman. But I'm not sure that's the best mood to follow up with. Overall, this is a remarkable episode in quiet ways. It's diverse. It has its eyes on the little places. One of the most meaningful moments to me was where Yaz asks Ryan when they're climbing the cranes.
Are you alright with this? Because if it's a problem, you don't have to do it.
That means a lot. It's okay to not be capable of doing everything. That's why I didn't like the Carl plot, because some of it felt like it was judging him. Though, that also led to my favorite moment in this episode, where the doctor really reminded me why we need heroes. When Carl couldn't jump down to her, and was stopped the one time he finally got up his courage, she jumped to him. And it was spectacular. And she was, in that moment, indisputably the doctor. And so here we get to the cliffhanger, which... it's Doctor Who. It's Doctor Who straight out of the 60s. The Doctor screws up with the teleportation and accidentally takes Yaz, Ryan, and Graham straight into space with no spacesuits, no ship. It's like seeing that TARDIS take off for the first time in an unearthly child. You don't know where it's going, you don't know what's outside, and you don't know what it could do to them. Except without even the safety of that box, which honestly wasn't that safe back then. Because you didn't know what it was or if you could trust the guy driving it. It feels threatening. It feels exciting. We really could go anywhere and anywhen without the safety of a comfortable icon like the TARDIS. I love that. And it shows that Chris Chibnall has a strong vision for where Doctor Who could go, focused on these people's lives and the impacts made on them, and the great spirit of adventure that comes along. It is right out of the heart of Doctor Who from the very beginning. And so any niggles I have with this episode, I am so sold on this direction and will absolutely be here next week to enthuse about episode 2. So overall, I'd give The Woman Who Fell to Earth probably about 6 or 7 out of 10. But overall, my hype for this series is through the roof. Thank you for watching. See you next week.